Hey, somebody needs to put up the wanted posters. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV is extensive. They have the Hustler turf equipment, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course, Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs. They're the big Polaris side-by-sides and the even bigger Ranger crew. You have to see the showroom, though. The showroom is my favorite. The taxidermy, antique displays, and an indoor porch with its very own porch swing. Comfortable chairs, television, free coffee. Stop in and meet Shannon and Lisa Tucker. They treat the customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with Tucker ATV. And visit the Tucker ATV Facebook page. Read Lisa's article. She's very funny. Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama, Tucker ATV, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers is what we do here on the Professional Noticer. We love it when somebody comes to the table with both. And we have that today. Very excited about this. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Our guest today is you're recently retired, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of recently. He's a recently retired special agent for the FBI, currently living in Northern Virginia. We're going to get into some of what he has done and some of what he knows. We're gonna find out some secrets, and this is going to be an awesome conversation with the potential to really inspire you or to probably make you mad. I mean, because I talked to John and I'm like, seriously, I didn't know that. It's so because John has been involved with the FBI in counterintelligence, surveillance, criminal investigations, and tactical operations. And when he retired as a supervisory special agent, not just special, but a supervisory special agent. Please welcome John Nantz. John, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Man, I feel like I've known you from afar for a while because around here, you're just like Tammy Nance's husband.
Exactly, right.
And
that's my real title.
That's your real title, yeah. and so it was like a countdown. We talked to Tammy a couple times a week, and she'd say, well, John's like 9 months away from retirement. Mm-hmm. John's like 6 months away from retirement. John's 3 weeks away from retirement. And then that day came. What was that like after 25 years in the law enforcement business at such a high level? What is that like? Did you just hit a wall?
No, I didn't hit a wall. It just, it's kind of when you know it's time to go, it's time to go. So not so much like a solid wall. A lot of the recent developments, I think, made up my mind. Some of the COVID stuff, the vax mandates, all those things, the way the direction the Bureau is going these days helped me to make up my mind about that. And the Bureau probably the last, I'd say 7-8 years has really changed direction.
I want to get into that. And man, I want to talk about your views on what's going on now with the FBI. Mm-hmm. I want to also talk to you about your writing because you've been writing for a long time. But what led you to the FBI? I mean, I don't even know how somebody gets in the FBI. I mean, there's not like an FBI course at colleges. Is there?
No. In fact, I sat out a year of college. I turned a 4-year program into a 5-year program.
Yeah, a lot of us have done that.
Yeah, well, you're a kid. What do you know?
Right.
So, and I worked as a busboy at a country club. And at that country club, they had a retirement dinner for some old FBI agents. And I was serving those guys and chatting with them, and it just struck me, man, what a rewarding career, what a cool job, right? So I did what a lot of people do. I thought, well, I'll finish up, I'll get my degree, which you do. You have to have an undergraduate degree as a bare minimum. And I thought, I'll get into local law enforcement and build a lot of experience, and the Bureau's going to love that. And, well, unfortunately, I'm a Bob Jones University graduate. Back then, Bob Jones wasn't accredited, wasn't nationally accredited. So,
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I I called. Well, back then you would open the phone book. I don't know if people know what that is these days.
Yeah.
But you'd open the phone book and you'd go down to the field office, which I was living in South Carolina at the time. So the Columbia field office's number was in the phone book, and I called. Asked to talk to a recruiter, and she sent me all the forms that I needed, which were, I don't know, 4 inches thick.
Oh,
Yeah, it was delightful. Wonderful process.
I'll bet.
And then it came time to put my education down, and she noticed that. So long story short, I ended up about 6 years as a deputy sheriff with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. That's where I started my law enforcement career. And then Tammy actually suggested, hey, why don't you consider law school? So I did. And I got into Regent, went 3 years to Regent University, graduated, reapplied with the Bureau. And this was maybe a year after 9/11,
Really?
and
Okay.
got hired. So that's how I started my
So a law
career.
degree got you there.
My law degree got me there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, anything that you can't answer, just say no, don't shoot me. But
No, that reflex.
yeah,
is
reflex.
hard to.
So it's like, how did you start? What did you do? What did they have you?
Well, you start at Quantico.
Right.
Back then it was 14 weeks. I think now it's 18 weeks.
Okay.
So they ship you off to Quantico, and that's where you get all your basic training, firearms, how to investigate a case, some criminal procedure, evidence collection, bunch of stuff.
Right.
These days, there's a huge counterintelligence and counterterrorism component, as it should be. Subsequent to 9/11, the Bureau instituted a lot of changes, and those were part of the changes. But you start out there, and then I can't remember exactly. I think it's about your 10-week mark. They kind of have a little ceremony in your classroom, and they hand out your orders. So the way you get to where you're going is you have a list, and you rank the offices in order of your preference. And then they decide where you're going to go, despite your preference.
Despite your preference.
Yeah.
So what was your first assignment? What was your?
Miami.
Okay.
Miami field office was my first assignment. Great work. And I actually wanted a career with the Bureau so I could do counterintelligence. I'd been in law enforcement for 6 years. I'd put handcuffs on plenty of people. That wasn't really why I wanted to become an FBI agent. I wanted to do something different. And the counterintelligence function, the counterintelligence jurisdiction, is like nothing else in domestic law enforcement.
Explain it to us.
Well, you're chasing spies.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And depending on what squad you're assigned to, that dictates what your target country is or target countries are. So in Miami, people will think, well, what does Miami have to do with counterintelligence, spies, this type of thing? All the world's spies, when they go to Miami to go to the beach or to go to the clubs or to do whatever, they're not on vacation. They're never not working. So the counterintelligence work in Miami is actually really interesting and very diverse. So you get a little bit of everything down south. So you're preparing FISAs, which are technical penetrations. most people would know that as wiretapping.
Okay.
You're also doing some physical surveillance, like actually going out and following people around and documenting their activities. And of course, all this is, all this is done within the confines of the Fourth Amendment. If it involves a U.S. person, if it doesn't, we have a lot more leeway. But that's what you're doing day to day. Recruiting sources, that's a big component of working a counterintelligence operation.
Wow. So what was your favorite thing to do? I mean, you have to do it all. Mm-hmm. But what would get your blood going? You go, yeah, I get to do this today or something.
SWAT.
Really? So
Yeah.
that was part of the tactical operations, right?
Right.
And so what did you do with them? What?
Well, I was a SWAT operator. You go through a tryout. It was a multi-day tryout involving shooting and physical fitness and a bunch of other stuff. And part of the new SWAT training program was taking us out on an airboat and dropping us out in the middle of the Everglades and having us land navigate to an abandoned house that was full of some local law enforcement guys that were willing to play the part. And so we assaulted the building, and that was one of my more memorable training evolutions with SWATs. That was a lot of fun.
Of course, that was before all the anacondas in the Everglades.
Yeah, well, they were gators in the Everglades.
Yeah, I'm not as scared of an alligator as I am the anacondas. An anaconda, he wouldn't even have to grab me. I'd just have a heart attack.
Right. Well, fortunately, I didn't see so much as a spider.
Really?
Out in the Everglades, yeah.
So what kind of collateral duties would you have? I mean, because if you're involved in counterintelligence and then sometimes you're doing the SWAT stuff, how does that balance out, and what other kind of stuff would they call you in on?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, there are a number of collateral duties as an agent. You could be on SWAT like I was, or you can be on ERT, which is evidence response team. There are a multitude of different things that you can become involved in. The balancing act is you still have a caseload that you're responsible for. So for me, SWAT was a great outlet because the counterintelligence part, which was my full-time job, was very cerebral, very paperwork intensive. The SWAT stuff, although the SWAT stuff is kind of like a three-dimensional chess game, it was much more physical. So it kind of gave me that outlet of not being stuck at a desk for quite a bit of time. Was
that something you would train with regularly, or something that they would just call you and say, hey, come on, just go to the shopping center or whatever?
No, yeah, we'd train several times a quarter. Miami has what's called an enhanced SWAT team, meaning it's bigger, gets more equipment, gets more training funding. Some of the smaller field offices, they have a SWAT team, but they're smaller teams. They don't get as much opportunity to train. So Miami was a real special opportunity.
Yeah,
I got to train with HRT, our hostage rescue team, which is our full-time SWAT team, if you want to, for lack of a better term. They do a lot more than SWAT, as their name implies. Their primary objective, at least in the beginning, was hostage rescue. That's why they were formed, to deal with those types of situations domestically.
Right.
It was a real good balance for me. I really enjoyed SWAT, and like I said, it gave me a great outlet, as opposed to the paperwork intensive side that counterintelligence was.
Right. I don't want to take you into an area you don't want to go, but I sense with you and a lot of your compatriots, I sense a lot of eye rolling going on, just with the current stuff going on with FBI's in the headlines. And how did you see the FBI change during your time there? And like, well, what was it like when you started, and how had that shifted, if at all, when you left?
Well, there was a major shift, and I'll tell you exactly when that occurred. But when I started, cases were fact-driven. You know, and the Bureau still had the reputation of kind of Hoover's Bureau. And I know a lot of people are going to have negative responses to the name Hoover. But Hoover did a lot of good things. He got a lot of things right. And in fact, if you think that Hoover was some cross-dressing pervert, you're actually the victim of the first Russia scandal, because that was a Russian disinformation campaign. Was Hoover quirky? Was he an eccentric? Absolutely. Was he a cross-dressing pervert? No, that came from the KGB. And that's actually documented in a book that's taken from interviews of a KGB defector called The Sword and the Shield. So if you're interested in that, you can pick up that book and read that whole story. So when I started my career, like I said, it was very the cases were fact-driven. The theory of the case was let's gather the evidence, let's see where the evidence takes us. And there was a very big there was an understanding that we were apolitical, first and foremost.
So who was the director when you came on board?
Mueller.
Okay, all right. You know, I had breakfast with him in Ireland.
Did you really?
I did. That's a story I'll tell you later, but it's...
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'm interested to hear that.
Breakfast with him and Bertie Ahern, the Taoiseach of Ireland, and then we went into another room where Jerry Adams was waiting. It was
very cool,
very odd day for me. But so Mueller. Okay, so keep going with what happened and just how it was when you started versus how it was when you left.
Yeah, when the change first occurred, Director Comey and the Clinton investigation with her private server and her mishandling of classified information, and I'll be very blunt, her criminal mishandling of classified information. If an FBI agent had handled classified information the same way that Hillary Clinton handled it, they would immediately have their security clearance revoked. You'd be walked out of the building. You'd be most likely terminated, and you'd be the subject of a criminal and counterintelligence investigation. That's what would happen to any ordinary person, any person with a security clearance. Well, that didn't happen with her. And I remember when Comey got on TV to discuss the results of the FBI investigation, and in the beginning of the interview, I felt very positive about it because he was listing all her infractions and the number of top secret pieces of information that were collected.
And so you're listening to this and listening to it as a person who's been raised to deal with the facts.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
So I thought, we're going to do our job here. We're going to see that justice is carried out. We're going to do our part. This is going to go to DOJ, and we're going to see a prosecution. Well, that's not what Comey did. All of a sudden, it's like he just turned on a dime and basically said, no reasonable or rational prosecutor would ever touch this case, would ever prosecute this case. And so he basically put his stamp of approval on what Hillary Clinton did. And I mean, it was shocking. I mean, for an agent, for someone who deals with classified information on a daily basis, it was absolutely shocking. And it's not just me. I know a lot of other folks will point back to that single event and say that was really a watershed moment. That really turned the Bureau into a political organization. And a lot of people don't understand how important elections are. They think, does it really matter who the president is? Does it really matter who the vice president is? It matters because of this. If you're not happy with the way the FBI is conducting itself now, it's because we have individuals in the White House who do not respect the Constitution. So they'll make appointments of people of like mind. And people will say, well, Christopher Wray's a Trump appointee. Well, Trump didn't always make the right choices in terms of his appointments. Or maybe he was misled or misinformed. But Christopher Wray has not done the house cleaning job that Trump wanted him to do. And whether you like Trump or dislike Trump, the fact remains that if you're unhappy with the way the FBI is today, it's because you have individuals like Barack Obama who appointed James Comey. Those individuals draw like-minded people to themselves, and we're going to get way into the weeds in the promotion process. But the bottom line is that there are two components to that process. There are objective standards, and then there's really professional reputation that comes into play when people are chosen to be promoted.
Right.
And overall, it's an equitable system. But the problem is when the head is rotten, that all trickles downhill. And any big bureaucracy like that, which reminds me of a point, I hear a lot of people say, well, why don't agents do this and why don't agents do that? Hannity reported the other day that 20 whistleblowers have come forward, which is great. But real change has to come from the top down in any big bureaucracy like that. I like to say that for the bottom to try to change the culture, it's like trying to steer a battleship with a canoe oar. It just doesn't, you're just not going to get the job done.
Right.
So in order to fix the Bureau, and this leads a little bit into my
so
writing.
You got all these whistleblowers coming in.
Yep.
But it's not the agents who get to choose whether to investigate it or not. Okay.
Well, you could refuse to sign an affidavit. Like I've heard some of this has been going on. Like people have been pushed to sign affidavits that they weren't comfortable signing. You always are at liberty to refuse to do that, but you're going to suffer the consequences. You're probably going to have to deal with our Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, and nobody wants to deal with that. And Jocko Willink, I listened to some of his stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not.
He's a former Navy SEAL, and he's got a lot of really good leadership principles. And he essentially says that if you're in a situation where you're in a leadership role and you find something that you disagree with, why would you relinquish your sphere of authority, your sphere of influence within the organization to make a statement that really isn't going to change anything? You're far more effective staying within that organization and doing the right thing where you are. That's essentially what he said. And I think that is really smart, and I think that's some really good leadership advice. This really falls upon not the agents, but the American people to make sure that they elect individuals like a president who supports and defends the Constitution, who will appoint people as director of the FBI or CIA or
Attorney General.
That will do the right thing, that will support your inalienable rights. Then you'll see the Bureau and DOJ and our other partners in the intelligence community doing the right thing, letting the facts lead the case. All that stuff is driven from the culture of what we like to call the seventh floor of headquarters. Seventh floor headquarters was where all the the senior executive service people work and make policy. So I guess that's a long way of answering your question, but James Comey really altered the culture of the FBI, and Director Wray just hasn't He just hasn't come in with a mandate to create change. I think that's the biggest problem with the Bureau.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being everything is just as good as it could possibly be, and 1 is it's about to go out of business. Where is the morale in the FBI?
Oh man, 1.5 maybe.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really bad.
I was expecting you to say 5 or wow.
Yeah, I mean, nobody signs up to be an FBI agent to do the will of a political appointee. We all swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a person, not to a party. So when people come on board with that expectation and they see that their agency is being politicized, I mean, it has a real impact on people's day-to-day attitudes and how they view themselves. You know, as a retiree, it's embarrassing.
You're a very recent retiree,
Yeah.
like a month. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I used to be proud of telling people, "Yep, I'm an FBI agent." Not so much anymore, because I know what people's perception is, and it's very disheartening.
Now what I'm about to ask, you can say no, nothing like that, but because granted, I'm trying to grasp this, and I'm not trying to make a comparison here that is anti-American or anything like that, but when you have a bunch of people in law enforcement that are being forced to do the will of a political person, we'll say, that sounds a lot like Soviet bureaucracy.
Sure it does. Sure it does, yeah. I mean, that point is not lost on anybody, any thinking person anyway. And we're supposed to be combating that. You know, that's part of the purpose of the Bureau. Part of the purpose of the Bureau is to be a watchdog and to make sure that we don't have people in government service that are compromised. That's part of that counterintelligence responsibility. It's our job to make sure that the people that are in government service aren't working for a foreign government or aren't working for a criminal operation. So when you see some of those same elements starting to creep into your own government, and you look at people and you think to yourself, if I were conducting a counterintelligence investigation, I think I'd have a pretty easy time demonstrating this person is compromised. And I see that more and more throughout our government, that we're dealing with individuals that seem to be compromised. And I don't think it's any secret that most of the intelligence community views China as our biggest existential threat. And if you have individuals doing business with China, in bed with China, if it weren't a politician, you'd think, obviously, this guy's compromised by the Chinese. But just because you got a guy in a nice suit and he smiles a lot, that doesn't mean he's a good guy or a good woman for that matter. So yeah, it's very disappointing to see. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic about November, cautiously optimistic. The Republicans, frankly, haven't done anything to deserve to win. But what we have going on with the Democrat Party right now is not sustainable. And I think most Americans see that. I think they look at inflation, they look at how much they're paying for gas and groceries and what's going on in the southern border, and they think something is fundamentally wrong and we need to change this. So I'm hopeful that in November we'll begin to see some of that change. And like I said before, it's so important. If if you're complaining about the FBI, well, then make sure you're voting, and make sure you're voting for the right people that will appoint people to make those top-down changes.
All right. Man, I feel like I ought to say, John, I'm so sorry. Golly. But I really appreciate you being here to give us some perspective on this. You are a great writer. Now, I can say that because I'm an okay writer, but I know great writing when I see it. And you're a great writer. And you're also friends with a bunch of guys who write these insider novels.
Sure.
And so, I have a few stories that I'm sure you do too about people getting accused of like finding some stuff and
Right.
And so, but you're working on a novel. You write for Townhall,
Right.
which is a major press outlet. And so tell me about that. How did you get so established on Townhall so quickly? And
Well, I owe that, like a lot of other things, to Tammy. Years ago, Tammy got involved with an organization called Smart Girl Politics.
that's where I met her.
Right. So it was a grassroots organization that was trying to mobilize women, moms, people that hadn't been involved in politics before, to get involved. And they would have summits once a year. And those were really fun events. And they'd bring in a lot of different people to those summits. Well, one year, Katie Pavlich, who is a Fox News contributor, she's on quite a bit, The Five, Gutfeld, Fox and Friends in the Morning. I think she just did a week hosting that. Well, she's also one of the editors at Townhall. So I got to know Katie through my wife, and she originally gave me the opportunity to start writing for Townhall. So that's how that started. And they have been fantastic over there. They let me write pretty much whatever I'd like to write. And it spans a broad arc of interests, I think, topics. It's not just bureau stuff. And when I write about politics, I try to make it about bigger things, bigger truths. So it's not just about mundane politics, right?
I understand that LinkedIn kicked off one of your articles the other day, and naturally the article was about truth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the title of the article was MAGA TS is a lie. I don't know if a lot of people know that's a Twitter hashtag, and it stands for Make America Great Again Terrorist, or the plural terrorists, which I thought was just absurd on its face. I mean, you see what Antifa did during the summer of 2020, what BLM did during the summer of 2020. I think common sense people know who the real terrorists are, and it certainly is not MAGA supporters or Trump supporters. Rush Limbaugh called this before he died. He said, you watch, they're not just going to come after Trump, they're going to come after his supporters. And that's exactly what they're doing right now with this intimidation campaign. And I think we've seen that most poignantly during the president's speech last night. And I think earlier this week, he referred to 80 million people who voted for Trump as semi-fascists, whatever that means. I'm not really sure what a semi-fascist is. I know what a fascist is.
Yeah.
And usually the fascists are the ones that are out burning dumpsters and police cars and killing people.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like that side.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you had one day on January 6th where you had certain individuals did commit some property damage, and they should be prosecuted for that, rightly so. But the vast majority of those people really were kind of bumbling into something that they did not understand. So the left wants to make a lot of hay out of that while they completely ignore a whole summer that resulted in tens of millions of dollars of damage and real loss of life. The only real loss of life during January 6th was a female Trump supporter whose name was Ashley Babbitt. And I don't want to get into too much of that, but well, maybe I will. From a law enforcement perspective, I carried a gun for 26 years. That was a bad shoot. I watched that video over and over again, and I don't see how ability, opportunity, and jeopardy came into play at all. And those are the standards for using deadly force. In fact, if you go back and you watch the video, there are like 3 or 4 SWAT guys in tactical gear right behind her. So how was she an imminent threat to that U.S. Capitol policeman or anybody further down the hallway? So anyway, the whole MAGA TS thing is to me a joke. I wrote a piece on that. And my column comes out every Tuesday, so I'll post that on all my social media. Posted it on LinkedIn, and I think one of the commenters said, "Why are you posting political stuff on LinkedIn?" I think that's probably...
Is it your LinkedIn account?
Well, I can't tell you how many other people that I connect with on LinkedIn that post political stuff all the time, but probably somebody complained, so LinkedIn censored it, which I thought was incredibly ironic since the piece was about truth and fascism and censorship, right? You know? So I reposted the link, and actually the repost got a little more attention than the original post did. So jokes on LinkedIn as far as that goes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, man, thank you. And you also are a contributor with wisdomharbor.com.
Right.
And man, I love your stuff. We're actually getting ready to edit the Lincoln piece.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
Good.
And so I love what you do, and I love hearing your perspective. And so the conversations that I've had with you, I'm always thrilled to get them, and I appreciate you having this one publicly with us today. And we can, if it's okay, we'd like to put on the show notes where to reach you.
Sure.
And so we'll be watching
absolutely.
your career after your career. So
All right.
Thank you, John, for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing what tiny bit of mental energy I have for you. Seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Personally autographed pictures of J. Edgar Hoover for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional funding provided by freeze-driedsushi.com. Have you ever had a craving for sushi, but it's late at night and all the sushi bars are closed? Have you ever been camping and wish you had sushi instead of hot dogs? Well, friends, freeze-driedsushi.com is your new best friend. Our patented process allows you to travel with your own stock of unrefrigerated fish. You can also stockpile freeze-dried sushi as you prepare for the apocalypse. Freeze-dried sushi comes vacuum sealed and pre-cut. It's also available in a variety of types. We have the usual tuna and eel, but we also carry some freeze-dried exotics. Whole goldfish, freeze-dried and individually packaged. They retain their color and are just perfect for an appetizer tray. Catfish is available, as are stingray, oyster, and swordfish. And as an added bonus, the freeze-dried swordfish is packed with just as much mercury as it had when it was fresh. Order today and take advantage of our 2-for-1 sale for every pack you purchase. We provide an identical package from our sister company, Freeze Dried Baked. That's freezedriedsushi.com.